The evolution of the Canadian lynx, Lynx canadensis. The picture on your screen is a Canadian lynx. Its scientific name is the Lynx canadensis. Its defining characteristics include a short tail, long legs, and black hair at the tips of its ears. These are called tufts. It is native to the northern United States, throughout Canada, and also throughout Alaska. Where and when did the Canadian lynx originate? There are two leading hypotheses about the evolution that led up to the Canadian lynx. The first being the fossil record hypothesis. This hypothesis is based upon evidence from the fossil record. The second is the genetic hypothesis. This hypothesis is based on genetic evidence of ancestry. There are two main similarities between the two hypotheses. Number one, both of them occur in the Pliocene era, and number two, being that the most common ancestor crossed a land bridge to get to North America. Let's start with the fossil record hypothesis. The earliest common ancestor, the Eosaur lynx, originated in Africa. About 3 million years ago, this species branched off into two lineages which evolved into the Iberian lynx and the Eurasian lynx. The Eurasian lynx then migrated to North America via a land bridge 2.5 million years ago. Then it was split into two populations, one more southern and one more northern. The more southern population evolved into the bobcat, while the more northern population evolved into the Canadian lynx. Next, we will go more in depth about the genetic hypothesis. The genetic hypothesis begins with an unknown common ancestor that traveled to North America 8.5 to 8 million years ago using a land bridge. 3.4 million years ago, this unknown common ancestor gave rise to the bobcat. The bobcat then evolved into three separate lineages, being the Iberian lynx, the Canadian lynx, and the Eurasian lynx. The Iberian and Eurasian lynx then migrated to Asia via a land bridge, while the bobcat and Canadian lynx stayed in North America. This common ancestor also gave rise to the domestic cat, leopard, ocelot, and puma lineages. Phylogenetic trees are used to reconstruct the origin of a given species. We will speak about phylogenetic trees in the next slide. What is a phylogenetic tree? A phylogenetic tree is an ancestral family tree that shows the relatedness among organisms. They are read from left to right, or root to tip, and they are in order of the most to the least primitive. They consist of branches and nodes, sometimes called branch points. A branch point or a node is a point where an ancestor splits into multiple different species. Let's take this bottom image for example. For species A and B, the most recent common ancestor is the node shared between them. For species A, B, C, D, and E, the most recent common ancestor is the first node of the tree. Next, we will talk about the Canadian lynx's relation to other wildcats. Relation to other wildcats. On the right is the phylogenetic tree for the genetic hypothesis. From this tree, we can see that the Canadian lynx is related to African wildcats such as lions and caracals, Northern American wildcats such as pumas and ocelots, South American wildcats such as jaguars and leopards, and finally, they are related to European/Asian wildcats such as snow leopards and Chinese desert cats. Next, we will talk about the speciation process. Speciation process. Speciation is the process of one species splitting and evolving into multiple distinct species. For example, the image on the right shows the same species of fox separated by a body of water. If the foxes are unable to swim across the water, this is now a barrier for the population. The group on the left will evolve independently from the group on the right. Eventually, they will be so different that they will not be able to interbreed. This means that they are now two distinct species. Even though we have two different hypotheses for the evolution of the Canadian lynx, there is only one hypothesis for the speciation process. This hypothesis is that after crossing the land bridge, there was a great cooling which created glaciers and ice sheets. These icy features during the Pliocene era are what separated the populations that independently evolved into the Canadian, Eurasian, and Iberian lynxes. Next, we will talk about the population structure of the Canadian lynx. Population structures. The size of Canadian lynx populations is linked to the snowshoe hare populations, which tend to boom around every 10 years. The graph on the right shows the lynx and hare populations. It is demonstrated that when hares increase, the lynxes also increase, but tend to lag a few years behind. Canadian lynxes are spread through their range in a clumped geographical pattern. This clumped pattern is typically centered around large populations of prey. Immigration balances emigration when the lynx populations are drastically increasing. However, immigration rates are greater than immigration rates when the prey population declines. There is a policy of mutual avoidance in Canadian lynxes. They are typically only social with other members of their population within the mating season. Occasionally, 2 to 5 individuals will work together to form a hunting group when there is small snowshoe hare populations. The image on the right side of the screen shows a group of 3 Canadian lynxes in the same family chasing after prey. Unfortunately, no studies have been conducted about the age populations of the Canadian lynx. Next, we will discuss local adaptations that the Canadian lynx has evolved. Local adaptation. The Canadian lynx has evolved several adaptations to its cold weather climate. The first being large, padded, furry paws that act as snowshoes. The second being a thick winter coat to keep them warm. This is a photo of lynx tracks beside a men's glove. And this is a photo of the Canadian lynx in the winter showing how thick and robust its coat is. Not only have they evolved to be more fit in their environment, they have also evolved to better hunt their prey. This includes large sensitive ears to hear them and excellent night vision in order to stalk them in the dark. Here's a photo of a Canadian lynx hunting a snowshoe hare. Scientists compare mainland and island populations to see adaptations occurring in real time. Cape Breton Island populations are genetically distinct from the mainland populations. This means that there is an active occurrence of evolution occurring on the island, with the surrounding water acting as the barrier between the two populations. There's also less diversity in the genes among the island population as compared to the mainland population. We will now talk about the mating processes of the Canadian lynx. In this photo, on the left, you have a Canadian lynx mother, and on the right, you have a Canadian lynx kitten. Unfortunately, nothing is known about the mate-choosing process or sexual selection of Canadian lynxes. We do know that the breeding season is from March until April. Pregnancy rates depend on the abundance of snowshoe hare populations. When snowshoe hare populations are low, females will either not ovulate or miscarry if they are already pregnant. Pair bonding between males and females are common but short. And finally, the female is the only sex that provides any kind of parental care. Finally, we will talk about how humans and the environment has affected Canadian lynxes. Human and environmental effects. The photo on the right is of a Canadian lynx. In the 1950s and 1960s, the Canadian lynx was hunted to near extinction for their pelt. They have since made a full recovery. There is a natural genetic bottlenecking that occurs every 10 years with the fluctuating hare populations. A genetic bottleneck is a reduction of the population size, which, in turn, reduces the genetic variation in the population. Effects from this include increased interbreeding, which can be detrimental to individual and population health. Human-caused wild suppression is limiting important snowshoe hare habitats. With the decrease in suitable habitat, the snowshoe hare population will suffer, and in return, the lynx population will suffer as well. Human-caused climate change may cause a bottleneck in the future. As the Earth warms, it receives less and less snow, which would expose the snowshoe hare population to other predators. This would also make the lynx less suitable for the habitat it evolved to be in. Finally, this leads us to future protection and studies. The image on the right you can see is a baby Canadian lynx, and it is in a tree. The picture on the bottom is a Canadian lynx that appears very angry. As seen in this presentation, much is still unknown about the Canadian lynx. It is of the utmost importance to continue learning the unknowns about this species as well as the effects humans may be having on it. It is extremely important to educate the public about the Canadian lynx, not only for human safety, but for the safety of the species. And finally, protection is the only way to preserve the species for generations to come. It has been argued that we are living in the 6th greatest extinction in history. Let's not make the Canadian lynx just another extinct species.